Okay. Are we all looking at a PowerPoint that says LRAD on the top?
Yes. Yes.
All right, fantastic. So LRAD, short for Long Range Acoustic Device, was a standalone company a few years ago. They recently got bought out by Genesis, which actually is a good thing for us. That's the same company that bought Zonehaven. So they're acquiring these warning devices and trying to plug together a large enterprise package for communities like ourselves. So these are typically known as OWSs, or outdoor warning systems. Really, they just optimize the physics of sound to try and point it in a particular direction so it doesn't disperse and suffer from the inverse square law, so it can reach long distances. And they've made it very clear. They've made the audible very clear so that wherever you are, it sounds clear enough for you to understand what they're saying. And I'll play some examples here in a second. But basically, the system that they have set up running right now will run off a cloud-based software that allows the user to activate their system from a cloud-based software. It'll go through a satellite link and then reach down to all of their individual components set up. And those components not only include the LRAD systems, but also has the ability to interface with other software like public-based software of Facebook or Twitter, if you want to send out PSAs to your community via those platforms. So it has a little bit more functionality than just hitting the large speakers. So this is typically what they look like. They're pretty adaptable, designed to either stand alone or onto the top of buildings, the side of buildings, or on their own posts. The design criteria that goes into it is really all about the physics of sound. So the designers try to make sure that they find a site that can reach from A to Z without having any large holes in it. So there is a little bit of design that goes into it. And if you've ever done sound engineering in a large auditorium or seen that done, you're kind of playing with the same games. You're making sure that the sound doesn't interfere with itself or also doesn't have any big blank spots. Here is some examples of what they sound like.
Attention, an emergency has occurred and you may need to take action. Please turn on your television and radio to get further information. Attention, an emergency. Attention, a tsunami warning has been issued for this area and you need to seek higher ground.
So as you can see, they allow you to customize your message and send out whatever you need to your public, and they'll be audible to the person standing there. And it doesn't require a subscription or downloading a device. You can hit everybody in the area. Uh-oh. All right, so the software that comes with it gives you the ability to push calls or text messages or email notifications to employees, the ability to figure out where your employees are by location, unlimited groups for user management, and like I mentioned, your cross-posting to social media for Facebook, Twitter. You can activate by zone or you can activate all of them. They also have a customizable panic app to where you can send out messages immediately, and something they call unlimited quick launch templates, which are simply just your ability to customize what you're going to plug together based on the event that you're trying to give a warning for. So what you heard earlier was warnings for the city of Laguna Beach, right? And they face tsunamis, wildfires. So they are plugged together their quick templates to send out a message depending on which direction they want their residents to go. Because obviously tsunamis are going to go into the hills. For a wildfire, they're going to come out of the hills and towards the ocean. The typical hardware that comes with it, each site has what's called an advanced cabinet, which will hold your MP3 player, your backup batteries, and your charging systems for either 110 volt and solar so that it will charge on its own. And then it'll come with speakers and the solar panel, and then your mounting system, which can either include as a pole or your roof mount or your building brackets. So your typical cost for the equipment for each site is about $72,000. Your mounts and poles range around $10,000. Your software setup is a one-time fee, typically at about $20,000. And installation of each device, including the design of it, is about $25,000. And then your SLA, we'll talk about that in a second. Your software LSA is about $44,000, and annual inspection for each one of them is about $22,000. And we'll take a look at how this looks at with Berkeley's contract next to us. So your service level agreement, that is at $44,000 expense that comes out. That is them charging you for their software, which gives you upgrades, your remote training. What they'll tell you is 24/7 monitoring, call center for troubleshooting, so you have someone to reach out to. And that is also funding their cloud-based services that they offer you and their satellite services. So let's take a look at Berkeley's contract. So Berkeley did an add-on with the city of Laguna Beach. So they didn't do an RFP. And what they did was they found an open contract. That contract is still open right now. I am very good friends with the chief of Laguna Beach Fire. If you know the history of my old agency, four of us left at the same time. One of us came to El Cerrito, the other one went to Laguna Beach. So we left within the same week. So they had an open contract with Genesis, and Berkeley did an add-on to that contract, so they didn't have to do an RFP. They funded it by Measure FF, which was passed in 2020. It was part of the recommendations by the Disaster and Fire Safety Commission and their fire department OES. Right? So they were trying to build a resiliency plan. And that cost that came with that contract included everything: the consulting, the planning, the construction, the installation, and all the software. So it's a package deal. Now let's look at some of their cost. Their design. All right, so their design for a neighboring city is 15 speakers, and you can see how the design physics work their way around their topography and terrain, right? But most interesting, if you look across the hillside, if you look at site number 11 and number 7, you can see the range of those speakers and where they're putting them. The Berkeley chief and I have talked about this in depthly, and agreed that if Kensington and El Cerrito go with this package, we'll form a standard operating guidelines so that the agencies send the same message to the same residents. So we would be effectively just adding on to the messaging and evacuation procedures that Berkeley's doing, so that we're in a coordinated fashion. But taking a look at this map, it looks like Kensington would probably need about 3 speakers, which sounds like that's something similar information you got before. Whereas Berkeley is covering their entire city, really Kensington is just be looking at covering the hillside. So that's their current design. They're going to do this in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the red, and then the green and the purple, the remaining phases, depending on the permits. Some of their challenges in Berkeley was that some of the sites needed to go onto school grounds, which required a specific permit that was outside of their city jurisdiction. So that slowed them down and put them into later phases. But when it went into buildings that they owned, that's a pretty easy install. So their cost for 15 speakers, all the installations, the permits and fees, they did a 3-year prepayment of their SLA for their software agreement, and they paid for 3 years of annual inspections. Their total sum was $1.9 million, which, like I said, is funded by that measure that they passed in 2020 to pay for this. So you figure Kensington is probably going to be a fifth of that, right? If you're just going on basic back of the envelope math on the degree of size. So that's what Berkeley's costs look like. And now we'll just jump right into the next topic really quickly, grant processes, because the goal would be, now that we know what we're looking at, and if that contract is still open with Laguna Beach, and I can get whatever details we need from Nico King, the chief of Laguna Beach, we'll talk about our goals of to do this through a grant process, right? So simply, this is just very basic, brief grants overview, but I'm going to start from just ground one. Usually when I'm looking for a grant, I just start at grants.gov because it allows me to do search criteria for things that are open or things that are about to fund, not necessarily things that are closed, right? It allows me to do some basic search criteria based on eligibility, right? So you don't want to be wasting your time looking at grants if you're not eligible for it because you're not a state, right? Once you find a grant that comes up in the search, and you see this screenshot right here, I just did a quick search for wildfire warning based on things that are forecasted or posted right now. And I was looking for eligibility of a city or county governments, right? But if you find something that fits goals, then check eligibility and then go directly to the agency's website. And I'll talk a little about that. So if I found a FEMA grant, I will jump directly to FEMA's grant, and then I will try and read through other funded grants so I can get a model in my head of who won this grant, how they did it, right? And then if possible, I will immediately reach out to the program officer, right? Whoever is running that grant, to get a phone call with them and just figure out what things I need to know to win that grant on a point series. So if you're looking at grants from both state and federal, on a brief overview for state, there is a possibility of getting a grant through the wildfire prevention planning. I haven't found anything specifically for LRADs. I couldn't find anything on a basic search for LRADs or warning systems, but I do know that Marin County is using part of this grant in their JPA that is paying for their LRAD systems. I don't know if it's directly funded there, but that's an example of getting a state-funded grant through CAL FIRE wildfire prevention. But the federal grants, typically for these, they come out of FEMA. And FEMA has these general categories of preparedness grants, hazard mitigation grant, resilient grants, shelter food, or emergency food and shelter programs. And to the best of my knowledge right now with the LRADs, they're probably going to fall underneath the preparedness or hazard mitigation grants. I couldn't find anything specifically, but that's what we would want to start to watch for. As we are writing grants, my experience has taught me some just basic rules of rule one, staying concise, because remember, grant reviewers are humans as well, and you don't want to kill them with words. A clear problem statement that's supported by data will move you up in points. I love quantitative or qualitative data, or even mixed methods using a gap analysis, right, to support the need. An example of that would be if we did a survey across the town of Kensington and asked, how many people, or something like a 4-point Likert scale, and said, I can evacuate my house without assistance in less than 15 minutes, from agree, strongly agree to strongly disagree. If we ask questions like that, we could come back and say we did a survey of our community and 80% of the citizens are not able to evacuate their house in less than 15 minutes, right, without assistance. Well, that would give us the data to basically back up our problem statement. Right. You always want to have a complete budget before you start writing your narrative, because a lot of these are matched, and every grant provider is going to want to see all your budget documents, right? And you always want to operate from a SMART objective. And I'm sure we've all heard the SMART acronym, but I'll just review it again, right? You're looking at specific, measurable, attainable goals, so that you can actually tell them what changes you're going to make, and they have to be realistic and timely, right? And they're looking for the goals that will actually change a situation with clear outcomes. So they want to know exactly what's going to happen, which for us in Kensington wouldn't be too much of an issue, right? And all the grants are going to have certain criteria, and when we write these, we want to make sure that we're writing directly to that criteria, so that we kind of reverse engineer the grant process. So that is my brief overview of what I know of the LRAD systems, what our neighbors are doing with it, right, and then what our potential ability to get a grant for it. when grant funding comes available, we'll have to watch it. And I will continue to provide the book that El Cerrito is given by their grant writer to this committee. So if they see anything that comes up, we can start to research it. I personally do not have much time on my hands to research specific grants, but I'm more than willing to help and plug together a team and walk us through that process. So with that said, I am going to stop sharing my screen and sit here for a little while and see if anybody has any questions.